Hello and welcome to Central Florida Salute YouTube. I'm your host Bob Peters, and I'm back here at Eagles 4273, our home base of operation, and I have a Navy pilot today, Mr. Brian Neunaber.
Correct, thank you.
You're my new neighbor.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, Brian, where are you from originally? I know you brought along some stuff, and we can talk about this a little later. And that's the plane you flew for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
You were a Navy pilot. Where'd you grow up?
Well, I grew up mostly in Baltimore County, Maryland, and ended up going to school just down the road there at Annapolis, the Naval Academy.
I heard of it.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Sometimes I refer to it as a trade school.
Yeah.
Graduated from there, and from there commissioned as an officer in the United States Navy, and chose to become a Navy pilot, and from there was sent down to flight school. And
yeah, you had quite the career. 30 years, is that right?
yes, sir. And I feel very lucky that for 30 of those years I was actually in the cockpit for 23 of them. So a lot of flying.
Yeah, I got some notes here on you. That you graduated from the academy in 1980. And you became a Navy aviator, like you said, 23 years of flying. You got a master's degree?
During my free time, I managed to pick up 3 master's degrees.
Wow. Your Navy, you had quite a few assignments. Can you recall your assignments?
Well, certainly. Of all my time at sea, I made 8 carrier deployments, 2 to the Mediterranean, 1 to the North Atlantic, and then the rest out to the Western Pacific. I have actually operated off of 14 different aircraft carriers in my years, but primarily have deployed on 3 carriers. My first carrier was USS Dwight D. Eisenhower in the early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Was over in the Mediterranean when, unfortunately, those Marine barracks were blown up in Lebanon.
Yeah, I remember.
And we had our hands full with the Libyan leader, Gaddafi, there in the mid-'80s. So that occupied our attention. I did have a deployment on USS Kitty Hawk there in the early 90s, and then 5 deployments on the USS Carl Vinson. So I suppose if I had a favorite carrier, I would say that USS Carl Vinson CVN-70 was probably my home away from home.
Now, I found out about you through Larry Miller, who's the commander of the American Legion Post 219 in Fruitland Park. And he told me, Bob, you got to get this guy on your show. He told me a tremendous number of landings you made on an aircraft carrier. Do you remember?
Oh, we keep good track of that. I suppose Air Force pilots, they track their hours, but carrier pilots, we track our landings. And so I have logged 720 carrier arrested landings, and there's probably a few more touch and goes that they don't make it to the logbook, though.
720. Well, first place, I can't fathom landing on an aircraft carrier, but I guess you get used to it and all. But
well, it takes a while. I would say that I wasn't very good early on. Both the day and the night landings can be a bit terrifying. I thank the bombardiers that rode along side by side with me for their patience and courage. But eventually, with more experience and confidence, the landings become more routine. And I miss it now. It's a great challenge, and I miss it greatly.
I wouldn't miss it, no. Do you ever have any close calls landing on a carrier?
Oh, sure. On my first deployment, I remember one where, on the aircraft carrier, the landing area is angled away from the island, and I remember where I had rolled out pretty far to the left one night, and the air boss up in the tower, which is it's a godlike mystery voice that comes up over the radio, says he calls me up and asks me to look over my left wing, which I did, and all I could see was water. And he said, "Now, we don't want to be doing that on a regular basis, do we?" And I said, "No, sir."
Yeah, I'm sure you wouldn't want to do that on a regular basis. You have many positions too. But I want to, before I go over to all the different places you've been and assignments you had, let's talk a little bit about that little plane over there. What is that?
Well, so this is a model of an A-6 Intruder, which is the airplane I flew for 15 years. It's a Vietnam-era design, first flew in the early 60s. We sit side by side. There's a pilot on the left and a bombardier navigator on the right. Only one set of controls, because the bombardier navigator operates his own weapon system, which is a full-time job also. And then the airplane was wide because of the radar dish up in the front, on the nose. So it was all weather. Was a leap in technology when it came into the fleet in terms of being able to work at night or in bad weather, especially in Southeast Asia. Has a fairly it's a fairly robust airplane that can carry a lot of ordnance. This particular model represents 12 1,000-pound retarded bombs with a 400-gallon fuel tank attached to the bottom. So one of my favorite loads. It's pretty substantial.
Yeah, I would say so. 1,000-pound bombs. Yeah.
We're probably making a crater, about 75, maybe 100 feet diameter with one, and you got plenty there. So,
how many of those particular planes would you find on an aircraft carrier?
Normally, a squadron when I was deploying was 15 airplanes. It would be 10 bombers, and we had a version of this airplane that was just a tanker. So we did all of our in-house, if you will, refueling with the A-6 tanker. And about a third of my missions over my career were tanker missions.
You mean in-flight refueling?
In-flight refueling, yes, sir. So we would be the airborne fueling station for the other airplanes in the carrier air wing.
Oh, okay. Because so you'd be like in the Air Force. They had the KC-135s.
Yep.
They had a boom operator in the back.
Yep. Been plenty of time behind those. I've been. Yep.
Yeah, and I had a friend of mine who was one of those boom operators.
Well, but I will tell you that the importance of the tanker mission can't be understated, because in the middle of the ocean, there's nowhere to go.
Yeah, you can't go over
fuels everything.
Yeah.
Fuels everything.
Yeah.
So the tanker always lands last, and actually, when a pilot becomes designated to be one of the tanker pilots for night operations, that's kind of a step up there in responsibility, because we would always joke, who tanks the last night tanker? So we don't need to answer that, but.
Well, my friend who was he was in the Air Force. He was in the tail of the plane, and he was a refueler. And I asked him what he did in the Air Force. You know what he said?
No, sorry.
I laid on my stomach and passed gas.
No, I see. Well, in this
Just a little joke there. Right?
In this airplane, there was about a 35-foot flexible hose that would come out of the belly of the airplane for the aircraft behind it. And you see on the front of the model here is the refueling probe. All Navy Marine Corps airplanes operate with that kind of refueling system.
Okay. So the other plane would be flying, and then they'd let the hose out, and you got to catch it in there.
Right.
Oh, I was wondering what that was for.
Yeah.
Wow.
And a lot
That'd be a little hairy, isn't it?
It can be.
Yeah.
It can be. And some of the other aircraft, the refueling probe actually folds away into the skin, for aerodynamics or whatever. But in the A-6, it was fixed in that position.
Oh, interesting. What do you got in that display case that we'd like to? I see you have a lot of awards.
Well, and I think that a lot of that comes certainly with the time in service. I don't want to understate, or be unreasonably humble or anything, but I was fortunate to have a very, very good career. And I would say that from each position that I had during my career, it built to make me ready for the next position. Yeah. And so I was always moving up in responsibility. But I'll tell you what, I'm most proud of, down at the bottom on the right side down there are our unit commendations. And I'm actually most proud of being in this unit or that team or that squadron to have conducted some sort of operation, to have the entire outfit recognized. It's the team and unit awards that mean the most to me.
The Wings of Gold. What is that?
Well, we are a little. Now I know parochially you were an Air Force type, and I can appreciate that. But Navy Marine Corps officers, our wings are, and there's a set here. They're gold, so we refer to our wings of gold, as opposed to maybe another brand, Army or Air Force wings that maybe aren't that
Oh,
color.
okay.
So we refer to them as wings of gold.
Oh, okay. Cool. The Navy got all the money. I'm just kidding, of course. Uh, Training for several landing signals officer for 8 years. Did a lot with the carriers. Flew combat patrols in Somalia for Operation Restore Hope. How long were you over there for that?
That was really very short because we were actually pulled away from that and sent up to the Persian Gulf for Southern Watch no-fly zone enforcement. But the Restore Hope operation had us patrolling Somalia for escorts of food convoys, UN commands, and those kind of things.
Yeah, you said also led the aircraft on the first strike in Operation Southern Watch.
Yeah, so after Desert Storm, we enforced a no-fly. Saddam was still in power, and we didn't enjoy the freedom of navigation over Iraq that we do now. So the Iraqi Air Force was still functioning in early '93 there, and we had imposed that no-fly zone. We had established a no-fly zone, and Saddam was, I'm going to say, abusing the freedoms that he was still allowed, and we were sent up there to go ahead and take out some of his capabilities.
Yeah, well, you guys did a great job.
There was 120 airplanes on that strike, that night strike from the U.S., Britain, and France, and it was pretty meaningful for us to be there with the training and the equipment, and to be given the word go, from the president.
I'm amazed at the, I'm an Air Force guy, like you said, but the Navy, especially nowadays, what I see on TV, protecting the riverway and with the submarines that can fire missiles.
The current operations over there in the Red Sea with those missile operations, that's pretty dicey. It's pretty interesting, and I don't know where it's going to go. None of us do, but I feel very proud that our cruisers, destroyers, our fighter pilots, because they're shooting drones and missiles down there from airplanes.
They're doing a tremendous job.
They're right there when they need to be.
Yeah, and you served 2 years as executive officer, U.S. Naval Station, Rota, Spain. That had to be a nice duty, Spain.
Well, that was wonderful. Southern Spain's beautiful. It was a great assignment. I've since gone back on vacation to relive some of those memories. It was a great time.
Oh, yeah. I just recently came back from Europe. I did a World War II tour.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and it was something I would recommend anybody who's into military history to do. He was selected the commander of Advanced Jet Training Squadron. And that squadron that's when you were awarded the Wings of Gold.
Yeah, so I gave wings to our graduates, and which was, during my time in command, about 170 Navy and Marine Corps junior officers that went on to become fleet pilots.
Yeah, and the squadron flew 39,000 hours without a mishap under your command.
So the interesting thing I find about that, for those 39,000 flight hours without a mishap, who's flying those airplanes? Kids without their wings yet. A lot of solos,
Yeah.
and so that indicates, I think, an aspect of how well trained they were.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when we first go in, we're all about 18, 19, 20, right? For the most part.
A lifetime ago.
Yeah, a lifetime ago, right? Signed as air officer with the U.S. Carl Pizen. Orchestrated first strikes in Operation Enduring Freedom at 9/11.
Yeah, so I'll tell you that probably the most rewarding event in my career, Bob, was, where you were at 9/11.
Yeah,
So where we were, we had just rounded the southern tip of India. We were on deployment on our way into the Persian Gulf. Mm-hmm. And we were conducting night flight operations. Of course, the tragedy of 9/11 happened during the daytime in New York and Pennsylvania and Washington, D.C. But it was nighttime where we were, on the other side of the world. And myself and my partner were conducting air boss and mini boss with a crew of about 7 or 8 enlisted, exercising flight operations on a carrier, training operations at night, as we're looking over our shoulder on television the live events of 9/11. Well, two of the two of the sailors on my tower crew had family in Manhattan.
Oh.
So we had to relieve them right away, and we continued with the launch. I mean, I basically literally have my finger on a button to abort a catapult from up in the tower if there's a problem on the flight deck. And we conducted that launch. We took the next recovery of airplanes that were already in the air, and we canceled all the missions that night. This is again 9/11, and brought those airplanes back. And we stood down for about 3 weeks as we went up into the North Arabian Sea off the coast of Pakistan, awaited tasking. And in early October 4, 5, and 6, we flew reconnaissance flights into Afghanistan. And on October 7th, we flew the first strikes of Operation Enduring Freedom. All of the high-value, $1 million weapons come out of the magazine for the first night, and it was very, very exciting. The Hornets and Tomcats are taking off their full afterburner, and between launches, they brought 2 cruisers alongside our carrier, and they're firing Tomahawk missiles. So, Bob, we have flames going off this end, we have flames going this way. And the reason why it was so rewarding, I'll tell you, is because to be in the place, again, with the training and the equipment, when the president says go, I mean, we're the team. We're the team. And it was very rewarding. We flew combat operations for the first 4 days nonstop. We went 24/7 for 4 days until we realized that wasn't sustainable. And another carrier showed up. And we had 2 carriers off the coast of Pakistan then for the next probably 120 days. For us, 75 days before we got into a port call. So and my family and friends say that you say that's the most rewarding part of your career, but you weren't flying. And I wasn't. I was actually facilitating, very high level combat exercise.
But I can understand what you're saying, because here these cowards killed a lot of our people, and I'd be ready to go after them too. You know,
no question about it. So there's no shortage of motivation.
No, yeah, you know, you and I. Well, we're about the same age. I think I might have a couple years on you. I'm not sure. I'm not going to ask you either.
We could cut the rings. I cut the. Never mind.
I don't want to tell everybody how old I am. I tell my kids I'm 29, but they don't believe it anymore. But however, I was out in San Francisco at a convention, and I'll never forget it. I mean, it was. I got up in the morning, put my suit on. I was going to go to a meeting, and I saw the towers going down, and Japanese writing, or Chinese writing, rather Chinese writing. And I'm thinking, oh, this has got to be a movie, right? This is a Chinese movie channel. So I flipped over to it and found out it was real. You know, and it's like, I went to the meeting and we didn't get anything done. One of our members, I was with the IBEW. They had just brought in a new kid that worked in the towers the very first day. And obviously they lost him, and it was a powerful, powerful thing. And then I got stuck there for 4 days. I couldn't get on a plane to go home.
Right.
And my kids are calling, and my wife's calling. And that's the first time I felt really violated.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I mean, I did 4 years in the Air Force, but I wasn't married. I didn't have kids back then. And it was a different scenario. I wrote a poem about that, and I sent it out. But yeah, anybody our age, or even and the younger people should be taught about it. They should learn history, military history, because then you can really understand and respect this great country we live in.
Sure,
you know,
I agree.
And people like you that are crazy enough to do 600 some odd landings on an aircraft carrier. You know,
was I crazy to do it or crazy to stop?
I don't know. Maybe a little of both. You know, we're lucky we have men like you and women.
Thank you.
That serve our country. But what would you say was obviously that last operation you did was a highlight of your career? But what other highlights would you say you had?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't say the birth of my 2 kids wasn't a highlight, right? I mean,
we're going to stick with military.
Yeah.
Okay?
So it was at a military hospital, so I was actually that qualified. There were some very interesting operations which I participated in up in the North Pacific Ocean near the Aleutians. While I was, again, landing signal officer, talking the aircraft aboard. It was raining so hard during some of those operations, some of those days, that the first thing the pilots saw when they landed was the sailor standing next to the aircraft telling them to raise his tail look. I mean, pilots landed, and I did 80 of these, talked these guys down 80 times, where they didn't see the ship at all.
Wow.
Our Air Force,
hairy,
our Air Force brethren say, how could you possibly do that? And we responded, there was nowhere else to go. It was how hard it was raining. I've had the unfortunate events that included mishaps at sea, the loss of shipmates. You know, I brought with me my aircraft logbook. These are actually all put together. These are represent all my flying time.
Let's hold them up here so the camera can see these a little bit. These are all your logbooks, right?
Right. So in there, every flight I flew in the Navy is in there. The black ink for day, red ink for night, and green ink for combat. They're all in there. And unfortunately,
that's a lot.
Unfortunately, some of the air crew that I flew with, they're no longer with us.
Yeah.
I recently, for part of a Veterans Affairs claim, had to go through here and chronicle with dates certain exercises, and it was very refreshing to see the names of all these guys I flew with. But again, unfortunately, some of them are no longer with us. So that's unfortunate.
Yeah,
so you lose people.
I share that, but I was not a pilot or anything. But I was supposed to be on a plane, and I got bumped off, and it crashed, and 11 guys died. 2 of them were my friends. But those things happen. But like I said, we're still the greatest country in the world. And do you keep track of anybody you flew with? Or
oh, sure, yeah. And
in fact, reunions?
We do have reunions. I'm proud to say I'm a lifetime member of the Tailhook Association. We have our annual convention out there in Reno, Nevada, and I see a lot of old squadron mates out there. And we have a saying that the older I get, the better I was.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But
I'd like to walk into school in the wintertime. The snow gets a foot deeper and it gets a mile longer every year, right?
But I'm still close with a network of fellas and gals that I worked with over the years. Bob, your series here is about service and sacrifice. And my service and sacrifice was with these people that I'm still very close with today, even 20, 30, 40 years after I first met them.
Yeah. That's understandable. It's really understandable. I mean, I do have one friend that I talk to occasionally, but I was not in a situation like you were. I was a mechanic, and I didn't fly anything, I just, so there was a couple of things that happened around there, but nothing like what you guys went through. And I give you a lot of credit. What year did you go in?
I graduated from the Naval Academy and became an ensign in 1980, May 1980.
May 1980, okay.
It was when my commissioned service started, retiring then around in 2010.
Now, pardon my ignorance, but an ensign, isn't that with a ship or something? It's not with the flying. When did you get into the flying?
There is one label or name of a flag that can be referred to as the ensign, and in fact we refer to our Stars and Stripes as sometimes as the national ensign. But the word ensign also is the first rank, equivalent to second lieutenant.
Oh, okay.
And the naming convention for the Navy ranks, as you know, for many years is different.
Yeah, well, that's what I met Larry, and he says he told me you were at what
06.
06. He says, Bob, you know what an 06 is? I says, yeah, one more than 05. I don't know,
Another confusing one is where of course, my rank was captain when I retired, but I could be a commander 05 or lieutenant commander 04, and serve as the commanding officer of a ship. And therefore, my crew would call me captain. I'd be the captain of the ship, even though my rank wasn't captain. So it can be confusing. So,
yeah,
good question.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I have had the honor of having a couple of Blue Angels on here.
Yeah, they're good. Those guys are great.
They're something else.
They're great.
Yeah,
they're great.
Yeah. So, what are you up to nowadays? You're just taking life easy, or you're going to write a book or something? What you should, because you got all kinds of experiences.
Actually, I have thought about that, but I don't want to go there now. No, my wife and I had planned to retire again 3 years ago when we came down here. She works for the Veterans Administration. She works for a hospital up in Washington, D.C., and they, I'm not going to say they wouldn't let her, but they really didn't want her to retire and said, we'll let you continue working from our home down here in Florida.
Oh, right.
So my wife keeps her full-time job as a Washington, D.C. employee from here in Leesburg, and so I support her. I have started to dabble into some local organizations. As you mentioned, I'm a member of the American Legion Post up there in Fruitland Park. We have family in the area, and this year I've been blessed with the birth of my first 2 grandchildren. So
congratulations!
Thank you very much. So there's some travel associated with that. So there's no lack of things to do.
Yeah, and I tell your wife, the VA is great. I mean, I use the VA, and so some people try to knock the VA, but they do so much. It's
Well, I think it's a better time in our society to be a veteran now, as opposed to what you and I might remember from maybe 30 years ago, when the veterans didn't seem to have some status.
50 years ago.
Perhaps, yes, sir. so, I mean, we see the veterans discounts on things everywhere.
Yeah, that's true.
The programs at the Veterans Affairs are better than ever. The medical care, the contractor help to facilitate all that is better than it's been. There's still challenges, but it's better than it's been. I think it's a good time to have been a veteran.
I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I was not in the Veterans Administration for a lot of years, and I'll be quite honest with you. I was like one of those guys. Well, the other guys need it more than me. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you're saying.
And so I looked into it one time when I was working, and they said, "Nah, you make too much money working." I said, "Okay." And I came down here, and I wanted to get my discount at one of the stores. I don't want to mention the store. It's a big store.
Hardware store, probably.
In that line, yeah. And they said, you got to show us some. I said, well, I got a copy of my DD 214 here. He said, no. You got to show me your VA.
Right.
I said, I'm not a member of the VA.
Right.
So anyway, I went down, and this is like 30 years later, and I went down to the VA, because now I know a lot of people down here. And he says, bring your DD 214, your income, and blah, 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 and we'll see what they can do. So I handed him my DD 214, and I says, well, you know what I was afraid of? Because a lot of corporations started getting rid of healthcare plans.
Right.
And I said, if they get rid of my healthcare plan, what am I going to do? So I'm going to go to the VA.
Sure.
And she looked at it and said, oh, you're a Vietnam veteran. You got the Vietnam service, the Vietnam campaign? Yeah. I says, yeah. She says, you're in. I never knew that, But tell your wife I'm very, I like to meet her.
Sure.
She's, the people in the VA are fantastic,
She actually recruits medical personnel for her hospital. She's a recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
And so she is all the time looking for certainly high quality medical personnel to join that staff at that hospital. So she could directly attest to the fact that the care is improving all the time.
Oh, yeah, it certainly is. Yeah, how did you meet her? When did you meet her? Were you in the service at the time?
I want to say maybe 7th grade, 8th grade.
Really?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No, we grew up together. Again, up there in Baltimore County, rural Baltimore County. They didn't have sidewalks. No, we didn't have sidewalks either. So we were pretty rural. And went to school together. We were best friends in school. We dated a little bit through college. Kind of went our own ways for a while, and when we reconnected, we've been happier than ever. So, and our families know each other. Again, we grew up together. It's a great match, no question.
Oh, absolutely.
We're both very happy.
Absolutely. So, you flew that particular aircraft? Any others that you've flown?
Yeah, good. Thanks. That's a good question. You mentioned I was executive officer at Rota Spain for 2 years.
Yeah.
As part of my duties at Rota Spain, the air station had 2 twin turboprop the military designation is C-12, but in the civilian world, it's a King Air. So we had two 8-passenger logistics airplanes, and I flew logistics missions from the island of Madeira all the way up to Sigonella, then for Navy logistics. So 2 years in a turboprop airplane is kind of slow.
Once you're flying jets, I mean, you know.
And then I flew. Of course, I flew in getting my wings as a young pilot. I flew with a couple of training aircraft, and then when I had command of that training squadron, we flew the T-45 Goshawk. I actually flew the TA-4 Skyhawk for a few months. I got rid of the last couple of Skyhawks, sent them to the boneyard. And when I was in command, I took command with about 21 airplanes. But when I left the command 19 months later, I had 43 airplanes. We get a new airplane every month, sometimes 2 a month.
Wow.
And we would joke about how it had the new car smell only for a little period of time, and then it would smell like something else for the young students. But no, it was a fun aircraft, 2-seat, high-speed trainer, a lot of fun. And then when I was embarked at sea as LSO, to become expert in how the other aircraft land and their landing characteristics, I have flown in the F-14 Tomcat, the A-7 Corsair, 2-seater, and then I also flew the E-2 and C-2, which I believe those are the hardest because of the wingspan is so great and there's very little room for error in those big airplanes coming aboard an aircraft carrier. So to become a better trainer and person that can critique and build on pilots' landings, I wanted to branch out to fly just a couple other airplanes that are in the air wing.
Yeah, that's great. Do you fly at all now, or
No.
did you ever get a pilot's license out in civilian life? Or?
No, I always
But
thought
you miss it, right?
I always thought well, I do. I always thought that I had I'd probably break a civilian airplane, because I'm used to pulling G's and everything, But no, I think about now. I see the airplanes overhead here in Leesburg at the local airport, and think about going up just for a couple of spins around the landing pattern, maybe. But yeah, so I miss it a little bit. It's very exciting, and it's very, very overloading for your senses, sights, sounds, smells, all that. To be on an aircraft carrier flight deck and in that environment. Of course, I've been exposed to all those things, which are part of my VA claims. But I wouldn't give it up for anything, So it's important to really put it all in the right perspective, I think.
So you would say to a young person watching this, the Navy is a great place to go?
Of course. Because of the challenges that were presented to me and that I was able to overcome from my own little personal victories to become successful as part of a team. I played team sports in high school and college. The Navy is very much a team. You got to appreciate that. If you like that, then those challenges will be there for you too. And I think it's great. Of course, I've seen the world. I've been in probably 30 countries, flown over, another dozen or so. Been shot at. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah, you've had a very interesting and great career, my friend.
Well, I would say there's one thing in parting as far as how that goes. Now, we didn't get into this very much, but upon retirement, I was able to transition into other aspects of naval aviation to include an expertise I developed with the landings on the carriers to be able to put aviation systems on ships. It was an important skill set that I was able to learn. And so therefore I transitioned then after retirement from the uniform services into DoD Navy civilian life, and I was eventually one of the senior executives in the F-35 program, which is our current strike fighter, the fifth generation. Of course, a lot of countries are buying them. I was responsible for getting those airplanes to sea. The Marines fly them off the amphib ships, and the Navy squadrons are flying them off the carriers. And I was there on the ground floor of some of that, to include the first tailhook didn't work real good. We redesigned the tailhook. Landings were challenging. We managed to work through all of those. So I was able to then transition from my uniform service to, again, still a very viable role in naval aviation.
And then thanks to the Navy career, that's one thing I find not too many people serve in the military. You know, that's about less than 1%.
It's concerning that it's less and less.
Yes, it is. And I tell you what, I think everybody should go into the service. If you can't go do the service, do the Peace Corps. Do something, because there is a bond between veterans. There's a bond with you, like the Navy guys and the Air Force guys and our Army. We grow up and we mature as individuals, because now we're exposed to different kinds of people.
That's right.
We're living with different kinds of people. We're on the same team fighting the same enemy. You know, and it's I think we need to have more people.
Well, it's central to your theme, Bob, which is service.
Yep.
In any sort of service role, I'm not talking about doing fries with that. I'm talking about genuine, organizational service to a society or to a community. That's where a person really learns the value of their efforts.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you could do other kind of service too. Yeah, but I'm saying well, I don't know. See, it just seems to me that the people in high positions would understand more about guys like you and me if they walk the walk.
I can agree with that. I can agree with that.
All right, but I'm going to stop now, because that sounds like I'm getting political.
But I will say that our senior leaders that have done what we have done are people that we can more easily relate to.
Yes.
I'll just say that, not necessarily because I'm a fan of his, but when I was able to visit and go to sea on CVN 77, the George Herbert Walker Bush, USS George Herbert Walker Bush, of course they tribute him, the president, for his time as a Navy pilot. He was the youngest pilot ever shot down. In World War II.
The old man.
Yeah, 19 years old.
Yeah.
When he was shot down. But I mean, so they know naval aviation. The Bush family knows naval aviation because of the President Bush.
Oh, we had some other great ones too.
Sure.
John McCain was one of my favorites. But we're talking about too much politics here, so we're not going to talk no more.
I'll just shift then to say what's cool. And you've seen pilots; they'll talk with their hands, and I've avoided that because I've had my hands pretty tight here. But I do have a photo at home of two pilots sitting in a wardroom on a carrier at sea, drinking a cup of coffee. One of them talking with their hands, and the caption reads, "Do you want to tell me what's cool?" And it's Gary Cooper and John Glenn.
Oh, yeah.
Talking fighter tactics on a carrier.
You know who I had privilege to meet? It was Captain Charlie Plum. You know of Charlie Plum?
I recognize that name.
He was in the Hanoi Hilton with John McCain, and he wrote a book, I'm No Hero. He says, my hero's the guy who packed my parachute.
Oh, I know that story very well.
With that, we're going to leave it, unless you got something else you want to say,
that's
my
great.
friend.
That's great. There's always another story, but that's next time.
That's right. You're welcome to come back anytime. And I'm hoping you join our ARI.
Thank you very much.
Well, this is how we say goodbye. See that camera?
That one there?
Yes, sir. To all our veterans out there and active military and their families, we salute you for all you do. Until next time.